Recording in progress. All right, Mr. John Weeks, we are back. It has
Good
been
to
a
be here,
long two
Tony.
weeks.
Indeed, it has.
Yes. So I got sick and then you had an anniversary. How was that? How was your trip?
It was very lovely.
Good.
Um, it was to commemorate the anniversary of the death of my wife's mother.
Mm,
So it's always a little emotional,
mhm.
um, but it's always celebratory.
Yeah.
And yeah, we took a trip down to Stamford, Connecticut, and we took in a maple festival. Got some really good maple syrup.
I bet.
Really good.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds funny to me. You say we go down to Stamford, Connecticut. You know how far up that is for me?
You know what's funny about that is because I say that because I'm looking at a map. And
Mm,
I remember when I was a kid and I first learned in like social studies or whatever geography that the Nile River flows, from my perspective, it flows up on the
mm.
map. I was like, what? Because it's coming down from the mountains. And well, I think that's pretty common in our society because when someone like Senator Lindsey Graham says that this regime or that regime should be blown off the map. Isn't he like that little kid back in elementary school who's just looking at a map?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and Ted Cruz wants to know if sand can glow in the dark. Yeah, they're just a bunch of children.
Got to make the grass glow, the grass grow, and the sand glow.
Yep, yep. So, what makes the grass grow? Blood, blood, blood. Yep, I've been there.
Will there be any blowback? Hell no.
That's a made up term. Those stupid gay libertarians came up with that. Commie bastards. Oh, damn butt fucking queers. I tell you, every single one of them.
I like how the great Scott Horton innovated with that and came up with backdraft where it blows up immediately.
Yeah.
So we start bombing Iran, and then a couple days later, boom, terrorist attack.
Yep.
That's backdraft, boy.
Yeah. I try not to pay too much attention to all the bad news. It's not good for the soul. All right. Well, so we have done the introduction and we have done chapter one of the book. What is it? Rules for Radicals. That's right. I know where I'm at. So, unlike last time, I did not have an opportunity to go over this chapter today. Last time I listened to it was 3 weeks ago, just before I got sick. So I do not have any standing notes, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty of places to stop because of the uh, make the means and ends of things are always going to have be an issue with me. That's one of those things that I always have issue with is uh, is means and ends. So I'm sure there will be plenty of places for us to stop as usual.
No doubt.
If you want me to stop reading, just tell me to shut up and we will shut up for a minute and see where the conversation takes us.
I'll be more polite, but will do.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying. It's that Southern charm I'm bringing to the table. All right. So, chapter two of Means and Ends. We cannot think first and act afterwards. From the moment of birth, we are immersed in action and can only fitfully guide it by taking thought. Alfred North Whitehead. That perennial question, does the end justify the means, is meaningless as it stands. The real and only question regarding the ethics of means and ends is, and always has been, does this particular end justify this particular means? Life and how you live it is the story of means and ends. The end is what you want, and the means is how you get it. Whenever we think about social change, the question of means and ends arises. The man of action views the issue of means and ends in pragmatic and strategic terms. He has no other problem. He thinks only of his actual resources and the possibilities of various choices of action. He asks of ends only whether they are achievable and worth the cost, of means only whether they will work. To say that corrupt means corrupt the ends is to believe in the immaculate conception of ends and principles. The real arena is corrupt and bloody. Life is a corrupting process from the time a child learns to play his mother off against his father in the politics of when to go to bed. He who fears corruption fears life.
Pause for a moment.
Uh-huh.
That made me think of this movie, Seriana.
I've
And
never
there's,
seen it.
yeah, it's with George Clooney and some other guys. Matt
Mhm.
Damon's in it, I think. And it revolves all around like Middle East politics and oil companies and elections. It's a pretty good movie. There's a scene where I believe it's an oil executive is upset that some federal prosecutor is looking to bring corruption charges against his oil company or maybe him personally. And he has this fun little monologue where he's like, corruption is why we're prancing around in this great society instead of fighting for scraps of meat out on the streets. And he just goes on and on. And at the end, he goes, corruption is why we win.
Mm.
And I thought of that scene when Mr. Alinsky was defending corruption.
Yeah. It makes me think of Walter Block in such a way that if your ends are some arbitrary like agency with no moral boundaries, it doesn't matter what your means are to get to them, right? So Mr. Block wrote that book defending the indefensible, in which he's like arguing for prostitution to be legal and how it's actually better for society to have the degeneracy of prostitution because it gives the women the freedom to do with their bodies as they want. But it doesn't take into account the reaction to this, right? And what that does to the soul of the entire society as a whole. Because if your society, if every person within your society is intimately familiar with degeneracy and debauchery, then the entire society is debauched and degenerate, right? And so Saul Alinsky here isn't taking into consideration when he's talking about, well, the corruption just is part of it. I mean, man is a fallen creature. We're corrupt from our youth, so we might as well embrace the corruption. But he doesn't consider he shrugs off the fact that by introducing the corrupt nature of humanity into the ends, that it would corrupt the ends. And maybe it won't corrupt the ends itself, but it will corrupt the people that are there to enjoy the ends, right? Because the way you act is becomes who you are. So your habits begin to control your life, right? Like how many times has a smoker gotten up 30 minutes into a movie to go outside and have a cigarette only to miss like the most, important 5 to 10 minutes of that movie so they can get that nicotine fix, right? And so that corruptive act of smoking, of inhaling cancerous materials into their lungs, has become such an identifying principle in their life that they're willing to give up, the good things in life in order to um, observe and enjoy that corrupting principle. And so you always have to take into consideration how the corrupt acts may not corrupt the ends itself, but it will corrupt the people that were committing those acts in order to reach those ends.
I forget if it was Augustine or Aquinas, but one of those guys, I believe, said something like, right action leads to right thinking,
Mm.
not the other way around. I just
Right.
thought of that when you were saying that. And it kind of makes me feel like Alinsky's kind of flipping that, where he's like, well, yeah, you start out acting before you're really able to think. Therefore, might as well stay stuck in the actions that you're doing
Yeah.
instead of committing to changing your behavior so that it changes the way you think about things.
Right.
And what's funny is just by invoking the idea of corruption, then he's implicitly saying that there was something good or there is something good that's being corrupted. And it's like he's almost like saying that, oh, well, I mean, there's no like objective good and evil
Hmm.
or intrinsic good and evil. It's just power, just
Yep.
whatever power decides. And whenever someone starts talking like that, I'm like, oh, okay, it's only a matter of minutes before they bring up like slavery or the Holocaust
Hmm.
because they're going to make normative assumptions.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, is that's just how you look at it? Because you're not going to say it like that. Alinsky's going to present it like, yeah, we all know this is evil. That's why we're organizing. I always find that this kind of discourse really fascinating. And people are getting into the ethics and the means and the ends,
Right.
especially when they're trying to justify something that perhaps would not have a consensus within you know the white heteronormative patriarchy
Yeah.
capitalist society that he's trying to destroy.
Well, and he's basically saying there is no repentance, that you cannot turn against your evil nature, that you should just embrace it and use it for your power. Use it to gain as much power and wealth as you can, because it's naturally part of who you are. I mean, when he says here, he who fears corruption fears life. He's not saying go out and try to make yourself a better person. He's saying utilize the worst elements of your human nature to grab power. And don't be afraid to go out there and utilize those elements. That's what he's saying. And it's just like, all right, whatever, dude. Like we're so diametrically opposed in the worldview that it's like it's it's repulsive to read at times. Like it's like this is extremely uncomfortable to read for me. It goes against every fiber of my being.
So for those of you at home who are keeping score, so far Alinsky has told us there's no hope, and now there's no salvation, there's no repentance.
Yep. The practical revolutionary will understand Goethe's conscience is the virtue of observers and not of agents of action. In action, one does not always enjoy the luxury of a decision that is consistent both with one's individual conscience and the good of mankind. The choice must always be for the latter. Action is for mass salvation and not for the individual's personal salvation. He who sacrifices the mass good for his personal conscience has a peculiar conception of personal salvation. He doesn't care enough for people to be corrupted for them. Excuse me. The men who pile up the heaps of discussion in literature on the ethics of means and ends, which, with rare exception, is conspicuous for its sterility, rarely write about their own experiences in the perpetual struggle of life and change. They are strangers, moreover, to the burdens and problems of operational responsibility and the unceasing pressure for immediate decisions. They are passionately committed to a mystical objectivity where passions are suspect. They assume a non existent situation where men dispassionately and with reason draw and devise means and ends as if studying a navigational chart on land. They can be recognized by one of two verbal brands. We agree with the ends, but not the means, or this is not the time. The means and ends moralists or non doers always wind up on their ends without any means. The means and ends moralists, constantly obsessed with the ethics of the means used by the have nots against the haves, should search themselves as to their real political position. In fact, they are passive, but real allies of the haves. They are the ones Jacques Maritain referred to in his statement. The fear of soiling ourselves by entering the context of history is not virtue, but a way of escaping virtue. These non doers were the ones who chose not to fight the Nazis in the only way they could have been fought. They were the ones who drew their window blinds to shut out the shameful spectacle of Jews and political prisoners being dragged through the streets. They were the ones who privately deplored the horror of it all and did nothing. This is the nadir of immorality. The most unethical of all means is the non use of any means. It is this species of man who so vehemently and militantly participated in that classically idealistic debate at the old League of Nations on the ethical differences between defensive and offensive weapons. Their fears of action drive them to refuge in an ethics so divorced from the politics of life that it can apply only to angels, not to men. The standards of judgment must be rooted in the whys and wherefores of life as it is lived, the world as it is, not our wished for fantasy of the world as it should be. Excuse me.
He
I
invoked the Holocaust.
Yeah, he invoked the Holocaust, and he's turning to this um, whole. Well, you have to give up your personal convictions because your personal convictions are standing in the way of progress. We're not angels, we're men, but we're aren't we ordered to be like the angels and to aim for that state of being of worship. So it's completely anti-Christ to speak in this fashion. He's not even hiding it. He's like, look, your religion, your Christianity, your myths, your legends, your lore, that's all fine and good for the past, but this is we're the new man and we have to act like the new man, right? So put all those ideas of becoming Christ-like out of your mind and be human.
We're realizing historical necessity.
Yeah.
Get in, loser.
I present here a series of rules pertaining to the ethics of means and ends. First, that one's concern with the ethics of means and ends varies inversely with one's personal interest in the issue. When we are not directly concerned, our morality overflows. As La Rochefoucauld put it, we all have strength enough to endure the misfortunes of others. Notice how I pronounced that name. I have no idea if I said it right. I just acted like I did, so everybody thinks that's the way you say it.
I think you nailed it. Because when I was
Probably.
listening to it, I was like, did he say Foucault? And then I had to look at my Kindle version and I was like, oh no, I've never heard of this cat.
Me neither. But
But you said it perfectly.
but
Or at
you
least
said
you
if
said
you
it,
say it with enough confidence, everybody believes you said it
you said
perfect.
it just like the guy in my audiobook. So
Oh, there you go.
you got reliability there, if not validity.
Yeah, good, good. Maybe that's how I was able to say it like that. Maybe because I listened to that audiobook a couple of times. Just kind of stuck. Accompanying this rule is the parallel one that one's concern with the ethics of means and ends varies inversely with one's distance from the scene of conflict. The second rule of the ethics of means and ends is that the judgment of the ethics of means is dependent upon the political position of those sitting in judgment. If you actively opposed the Nazi occupation and joined the underground resistance, then you adopted the means of assassination, terror, property destruction, the bombing of tunnels and trains, kidnapping, and the willingness to sacrifice innocent hostages to the end of defeating the Nazis.
That's
Those
why they
who
call us Nazis.
That's why they call you Nazis. That's right. That's the only reason. Those who opposed the Nazi conquerors regarded the resistance as a secret army of selfless, patriotic idealists, courageous beyond expectation and willing to sacrifice their lives to their moral convictions. To the occupation authorities, however, these people were lawless terrorists, murderers, saboteurs, assassins who believed that the end justified the means and were utterly unethical according to the mystical rules of war. Any foreign occupation would so ethically judge its opposition. However, in such conflict, neither protagonist is concerned with any value except victory. It is life or death. To us, the Declaration of Independence is a glorious document and an affirmation of human rights. To the British, on the other hand, it was a statement notorious for its deceit by omission. In the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Particulars, attesting to the reasons for the revolution, cited all of the injustices which the colonists felt that England had been guilty of, but listed none of the benefits. There was no mention of the food the colonies had received from the British Empire during times of famine, medicine during times of disease, soldiers during times of war with the Indians and other foes, or the many other direct and indirect aids to the survival of the colonies. Neither was there notice of the growing number of allies and friends of the colonists in the British House of Commons, and the hope for imminent remedial legislation to correct the inequities under which the colonies suffered. Just one correction. He says, to the British, on the other hand, the Declaration of Independence was a statement notorious for its deceit by omission. This man never talked to anybody from Britain because they do not think of the Declaration of Independence, let alone the American Revolution, in any way, shape, or form unless an American brings it up to them. They do not care. They have moved on. We are the only ones that are proud that the French had to come help bail us out with their croissants. Jefferson, Franklin, and others were honorable men, but they knew that the Declaration of Independence was a call to war. They also knew that a list of many of the constructive benefits of the British Empire to the colonists would have to have so diluted the urgency of the call to arms for the revolution as to have been self-defeating. The result might well have been a document attesting to the fact that justice weighted down the scale at least 60% on our side and only 40% on their side, and that because of that 20% difference, we were going to have a revolution. To expect a man to leave his wife, his children, and his home, to leave his crops standing in the field and pick up a gun and join the Revolutionary Army for a 20% difference in the balance of human justice was to defy common sense. The Declaration of Independence as a declaration of war had to be what it was, a 100% statement of the justice of the cause of the colonists and a 100% denunciation of the role of the British government as evil and unjust. Our cause had to be all shining justice, allied with the angels. Theirs had to be all evil, tied to the devil. That's like Iran and Israel fighting over which nation actually worships Baal. So there you go. In no war has the enemy or the cause ever been gray. Therefore, from one point of view, the omission was justified. From the other, it was deliberate deceit.
In bringing up war makes me think about an idea I've been kind of grappling with recently. There's the idea that, or the saying that truth is the first casualty of war. And I've heard that for a long time,
Mm,
past couple decades. And maybe because I'm an American and I'm used to my government just lying us into wars, that I always interpreted that to mean, well, yeah, you got to lie the people into the war. So the first thing you do is lie. So that's the first casualty of the war. But what I've realized, or how I'm starting to look at it differently, is even if you're the country that is uh, attacked in an unprovoked attack, the truth is going to die on your side
mm,
because the war is going to necessitate that you free yourself from nuance
yep.
and that you, yeah, that's the enemy. Anything that helps to defeat the enemy is good. Anything that helps the enemy is bad.
Hmm.
So don't be a defeatist. Don't don't speak out publicly about how like our weapon systems aren't working or anything. Just shut up. This is life or death.
Yeah.
And and how that there's like the the arena of war is a place where people can really, yeah, they can really embrace their humanity, as you were saying, in all like the corrupt negative ways because they have that cover.
Hmm.
This is an existential struggle. Of course, we did what needed to be done. Normally, we wouldn't do that, but it was
Yeah.
war.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was like whenever, when Tucker had made a comment a while back about how when you're talking about like unconditional surrender, that ignites the thought in the people that are being conquered, that gives permission to the conquering army to rape your women. Tucker wasn't accusing the United States of sending out soldiers to rape women and kill children. That's not what he was saying. War is the worst instinct of human nature. It brings out the worst of humanity. And if there's ever going to be an excuse for any of these men to tap into the most monstrous part of themselves, it is a war. And in a situation where they are in conflict and the enemy unconditionally surrenders, there is always a risk that there will be rape and murder in those situations. You can look at the Fourth Crusades with the Catholics coming through and not only slaughtering the Orthodox Christians, but they were raping nuns on the altar. They were doing terrible things. And it's not because like Catholics are such bad people. I mean, they have their issues and, institutionally they have a lot of problems, but it's because they entered the worst possible arena for humanity to be involved in. There's that book. What's that book called? Ordinary Men. Ordinary Men. That's a great book, and it's about normal, average guys that get recruited into the Nazi regime to be, soldiers for Nazi Germany. I think it was a group out of Poland, if I'm not mistaken. And it just talks about how these guys were like basic, like just normal, ordinary guys. They were mechanics, husbands, fathers, and they were ordered to do all these grotesque things. And not all of them went through with it, but many of them did. Some of them would go hide in the woods. And what would the Nazis, the brass in the Nazi regime do? They wouldn't do anything to the men that didn't want to engage in it because they didn't want to expose the fact that there were some subordinates. So they pretended like everybody was engaging in it, that would bolster those that were accepting the orders unquestioningly and not leave any room for doubt. So yeah, I mean, war is terrible, and it brings out the worst of all humanity. And when you said that truth was the first casualty of war, I always thought you were making the argument that Khomeini was truth or something. And I was like, no, that's definitely not it. No, but you made a correct statement though, because both sides are lying. And this is why it's hard from my perspective, it's hard to listen to anybody on the left, even though I agree with them on being anti-war. It's hard, very difficult for me to listen to anyone on the left. And I throw a hissy fit about this sometimes when I hear my friends start spreading like leftist talking points. And the reason is they will start utilizing the data from the enemy to prove that America is wrong. And my point is, we don't need the lies of the enemy to prove that our government is lying. We can just look at our government and chase down the lies without spreading the enemy's propaganda as well. And the left is really bad about that. They are really bad about, well, I'm not on Iran's side, but Iran is reporting blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, of course they're reporting that because they want the Iranians to read that. Like they want the Iranians, they want the spirit in Iran. It's just like if you talk to anybody about the Ukraine Russia war, depending on who they want to win that war is who's winning the war. You know, you'll hear some people in the Congress say that Ukraine is winning. And then you'll hear other people say, no, Russia's winning. And it's like, I don't think anybody's winning, man. I think everybody loses at war. I think it's bad for humanity. I think it's bad for everybody. Even if you quote unquote win the war, you conquer your enemy, your soul has been completely corrupted, and Saul Alinsky is on your side.
I know a
That should
nurse.
be the new the commercial was a State Farm, the Mayhem guy. He could just come up, I'm corruption. And I am in your soul.
Embrace me.
Sorry,
I
go ahead.
I know a nurse who works in the VA system. She tells me some crazy stories. And one story she told me was about a Vietnam veteran who came in to the VA. And unlike many of the guys she works with, he didn't have uh really any big problems. Like he wasn't physically injured. He didn't have any substance abuse issues. He didn't have any like psychosis or anything like that. He just had really bad insomnia.
Mm,
And he would just like pace the hallways like all night. And she talked to him about it. And he's like, I hate to fall asleep because when I fall asleep, I hear his screams. And as she's telling me this story, I'm like, oh God, he must have like in my head, I'm picturing like a battlefield. He must have like seen his buddy die, like in his arms or something, like in a movie. And but no, that wasn't what it was at all. It was that he ran over a Vietnamese guy in his truck. So now as she's telling me this story, and I'm picturing a battlefield, even though like I
mm,
know this is wrong, but my mind is just giving me this
right. These images, yeah.
right of the battlefield, and it's all crazy and people shooting, and he runs the guy over and he's screaming, he feels really bad. No, he's just driving through Saigon and he hits a guy because like whatever, like it's busy or whatever. And the superior officer who's sitting shotgun orders him to back up and finish the guy off. And he does. And he's been hearing that guy scream every night for the rest of his life.
Mm,
I was like, damn, that is like, I mean, when they talk about moral injury,
yeah.
that is like some crazy stuff.
Mm,
That was just one little story. And there's like billions of stories like that, I'm sure.
yeah.
And yeah, and that is never even just really even discussed.
Yeah, we don't talk about the innocence. Well, we try to, but they don't like to talk about the innocent lives lost and what that does to somebody knowing that they killed somebody who's innocent. I think I remember hearing a story, and I'd have to go back. There was a documentary that came out a few years back about the operators of drones, the drone operators, and the amount of PTSD they were suffering because they knew the amount of innocent lives they were taking along with the terrorist lives. And they could see, like, it would show videos and it was like, oh, I mean, you've seen these types of videos, right? It is like there's like the collateral murder video and stuff like that. It's all like heat sensor, and they could see, but they could see how many people were down there. And it's like those two people are our targets, and there's 30 other people right there, you know? And even a drone operator is suffering moral injury from the operations that are going on overseas because they know that they're killing innocents. They know they can see the amount of innocence involved. But, all right, let's keep reading. Otherwise, we're just going to talk anti-war and Iran the entire freaking for the next like 6 hours. History is made up of moral judgments based on politics, and the winners write history. We condemned Lenin's, excuse me, this damn cough is just so annoying. We condemned Lenin's acceptance of money from the Germans in 1917, but were discreetly silent while our Colonel William B. Thompson in the same year contributed $1 million to the anti Bolsheviks in Russia. As allies of the Soviets in World War II, we praised and cheered communist guerrilla tactics when the Russians used them against the Nazis during the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. We denounce the same tactics when they are used by communist forces in different parts of the world against us. But you did cheer them when they were used in South Africa against the apartheid regime. Well, actually, they weren't used against the apartheid regime. They were used against the impoverished Africans in the townships by the ANC. But let's not get off on that tangent either. The opposition's means used against us are always immoral, and our means are always ethical and rooted in the highest of moral values. George Bernard Shaw in Man and Superman pointed out the variations in ethical definitions by virtue of where you stand. Mendoza said to Tanner, I am a brigand, brigand. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm thinking bridegroom. I just got out of church. I am a brigand. I live by robbing the rich, Tanner replied. I am a gentleman. I live by robbing the poor. Shake hands. The third rule of the ethics of means and ends is that in war, and the end justifies almost any means. Agreements on the Geneva Rules on treatment of prisoners or use of nuclear weapons are observed only because the enemy or his potential allies may retaliate. Winston Churchill's remarks to his private secretary a few hours before the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union graphically pointed out the politics of means and ends in war. Informed of the imminent turn of events, the secretary inquired how Churchill, the leading British anti-communist, could reconcile himself to being on the same side as the Soviets. Would not Churchill find it embarrassing and difficult to ask his government to support the communists? Churchill's reply was clear and unequivocal. Not at all. I have only one purpose, the destruction of Hitler. And my life is much simplified thereby. If Hitler invaded hell, I would make at least a favorable reference to the devil in the House of Commons. In the Civil War, President Lincoln did not hesitate to suspend the right of habeas corpus and to ignore the directive of the Chief Justice of the United States. Again, when Lincoln was convinced that the use of military commissions to try civilians was necessary, he brushed aside the illegality of this action with the statement that it was indispensable to the public safety. He believed that the civil courts were powerless to cope with the insurrectionist activities of civilians. Must I shoot a simple minded soldier boy who deserts, while I must not touch a hair of a wily agitator who induces him to desert? The fourth rule of the ethics of means and ends is that judgment must be made in the context of the times in which the action occurred and not from any other chronological vantage point. The Boston Massacre is a case in point. British atrocities alone, however, were not sufficient to convince the people that murder had been done on the night of March 5th. There was a deathbed confession of Patrick Carr that the townspeople had been the aggressors and that the soldiers had fired in self defense. This unlooked for recantation from one of the martyrs who was dying in the odor of sanctity with which Sam Adams had vested them sent a wave of alarm through the Patriot ranks. But Adams blasted Carr's testimony in the eyes of all pious New Englanders by pointing out that he was an Irish papist who had probably died in the confession of the Roman Catholic Church. After Sam Adams had finished with Patrick Carr, even Tories did not dare to quote him to prove Bostonians were responsible for the massacre. To the British, this was a false, rotten use of bigotry and an immoral means of characteristic of the revolutionaries or the Sons of Liberty. To the Sons of Liberty and to the Patriots, Sam Adams' action was brilliant strategy and a God sent lifesaver. Today, we may look back and regard Adams' action in the same light as the British did, but remember that we are not today involved in a revolution against the British Empire. And this is the tactic that's still used today. You'll see this all the time, and I just keep pointing to Tucker Carlson because it's the most obvious example. But because he stands defiantly against the war in Iran, and he is repeating the words of Marco Rubio in a negative fashion, then he's anti Semitic. But when Marco Rubio says, hey, we had to go to war in Iran and fire these missiles at Iran because Iran was going to fire missiles at American soldiers because Israel was going to fire missiles at Iran, it's considered good because Marco Rubio is for the action. And this is just the way it goes. They are going to twist and turn and maneuver any kind of propaganda they can to make it sound like those that stand against their actions are working for the enemy or are sympathetic to the enemy, when in all actuality, most of us that are against this war are against this war because we are against America being involved overseas. It is not in our interest to send our blood and treasure to the Middle East to be wasted so that Israel can have the greater Israel project come to fruition.
I was accused just this week by a friend of being a defeatist.
You're a defeatist.
A defeatist. And just for, from my perspective, speaking truth. And part of that truth was just referencing, things that the administration had said, things that Trump had said.
Mm.
One of my friends was like, Iran is run by evil men. And I was like, that tracks. I agree with you. But who runs our government? And then I was bringing up how, and we're basically allied with Syria, which is run by a former Al Qaeda commander. So why couldn't we work out a deal with Iran? It's just business, right? They're like, and they just can't interact with that idea. They just didn't. This was in a group chat. They just ignored it. But it's like, well, obviously Syria is run by evil men by our shared standard. Al Qaeda knocked down our towers. We all think that's evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's fine for American foreign policy to be aligned with them. But couldn't work out a deal with Iran?
Yeah.
And it is funny that people will go to oh my God, you're anti-Semitic. And then someone in the Trump administration will be like, I mean, I don't know, Israel said we had to do it. What? That's the anti-Semitic trope, man. But but we did it. We wanted to do it, and we did it. So it's okay that we said
we
that.
We wanted to do it because Israel said we needed to do it. So. Yeah, or you can just turn back to Trump's own words whenever he was being interviewed by Bill O'Reilly, and Bill O'Reilly was like, Putin is a thug and a gangster and a murderer, and Trump looked at Bill O'Reilly and said, "You think we're so innocent, Bill?" You know, it's like, there you go. That's
That's
it.
moral equivalency. Don't hold us to the same standard that you hold the
Right.
enemy
Yeah.
to.
You're quote mining. I'm just quoting. I'm not quote mining. It's right there. Uh, Ethical standards must be elastic to stretch with the times. In politics, the ethics of means and ends can be understood by the rules suggested here. History is made up of little else but examples such as our position on freedom of the high seas in 1812 and 1917, contrasted with our 1962 blockade of Cuba, or our alliance in 1942, excuse me, with the Soviet Union against Germany, Japan, and Italy, and the reversal in alignments in less than a decade. Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus, his defiance of a directive of the Chief Justice of the United States, and the illegal use of military commissions to try civilians were by the same man who had said in Springfield 15 years earlier, "Let me not be understood as saying that there are no bad laws, or that grievances may not arise for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. I mean to say no such thing, but I do mean to say that although bad laws, if they exist, should be repealed, still, while they continue in force for the sake of example, they should be religiously observed." This was also the same Lincoln who, a few years prior to his signing the Emancipation Proclamation, stated in his first inaugural address, "I do but quote from one of those speeches when I declared that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. Those who nominated and elected me did so with full knowledge that I made this and many similar declarations, and I've never recanted them."
Oh, now we got a slavery reference. Slavery and the Holocaust. It's so funny. It's like, look, Tommy, there's no such thing as good and evil. Or maybe there is, but it doesn't matter what you think it is.
Yeah.
But slavery, that was pure evil. We all agree on that, right?
Yeah.
It's
So
evil
we have
because
to
it's
do the
evil.
most evil thing in the world to end it. Because two wrongs make a right. That's what I was always taught, I think. Something like that.
Forget someone was,
Or is it two rights don't make a wrong? Well, I don't remember.
I don't know, it was
I'm corrupted. I don't know.
Bill Buford at the Libertarian Institute was referencing some philosopher recently. And then I was looking at the guy's quotes. I forget his name, but one of his quotes was something like, two wrongs don't make a right, but they do make a good alibi.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. Well, again, as Napoleon pointed out, history is written by the winners, so you can justify anything in hindsight. So, and if something happens that you can't justify, even though I mean they justify dropping nuclear bombs. If you can justify dropping nuclear bombs and killing 60% of the Christian population of Japan, then you can justify anything. There's nothing you can't justify. I mean, you were literally burning children to death. So, I mean, let's just look at it with clear glasses. They can justify anything. And if by chance it happens to be something so uncomfortable they don't want to justify, they just leave it out of the records.
I like how, like growing up, learning about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I was always told the justification I was giving is, well, it was either that or send in the ground troops and lose a million men.
Yeah,
So,
or yeah, more people were going to die if we.
right. Yeah. And then it was always like presented to me as like we were going to lose American soldiers. But
Hmm.
then in real time, and I've since heard this justification was like, well, more Japanese would have died. We were doing this to save the Japanese.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Well, I'm killing you for your own good.
Did you understand? Iran has killed 100,000 protesters. We need to get in there and start bombing these people.
Oh no, 5 minutes have passed. Now it's 130,000.
I forget the quote exactly from Trump when he announced the start of the war, but he's like, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I say to the Iranian people, the hour of your freedom is at hand. Please stay inside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. Like, wow, someone actually wrote that for him. That's crazy. We're from the empire and we're here to help.
And he delivered it like a G. Ugh. Those who would be critical to the ethics of Lincoln's reversal of positions have a strangely unreal picture of a static, unchanging world where one remains firm and committed to certain so called principles or positions. In the politics of human life, consistency is not a virtue. To be consistent means, according to the Oxford Universal Dictionary, standing still or not moving. Men must change with the times or die. The change in Jefferson's orientation when he became president is pertinent to this point. Jefferson had incessantly attacked President Washington for using national self interest as the point of departure for all decisions. He castigated the president as narrow and selfish and argued that decisions should be made on a world interest basis to encourage the spread of the ideas of the American Revolution. That Washington's adherence to the criteria of national self interest was a betrayal of the American Revolution. However, from the first moment when Jefferson assumed the presidency of the United States, his every decision was dictated by national self interest. This story from another century has parallels in our century and every other. And then tomorrow, Lindsey Graham's going to come out and say that he is the long, long lost great grandson of Thomas Jefferson and his slave in which he had children with. That's where he gets his warhawkism runs in his blood because everybody remembers Thomas Jefferson was the first to declare war on Islam and the Barbary pirates. That's why he created the Marines. The call to prayer is keeping me awake. The fifth rule of the ethics of means and ends is that concern with ethics increases with the number of means available and vice versa. To the man of action, the first criterion is determining which means to employ is to assess what means are available. Reviewing and selecting available means is done on a straight utilitarian basis. Will it work? Moral questions may enter when one chooses among equally effective alternate means. But if one lacks the luxury of a choice and is possessed of only one means, then the ethical question will never arise. Automatically, the lone means becomes endowed with a moral spirit. Its defense lies in the cry, "What else could I do? I had no choice. I tripped, fell out of my clothes, and landed on a continent of dicks. I wasn't cheating on you, I promise." Inversely, the secure position in which one possesses the choice of a number of effective and powerful means is always accompanied by that ethical concern and serenity of conscience so admirably described by Mark Twain as the calm confidence of a Christian holding four aces. To me, ethics is doing what is best for the most. During a conflict with a major corporation, I was confronted with a threat of public exposure of a photograph of a motel, Mr. and Mrs. registration, and photographs of my girl and myself. I said, "Go ahead and give it to the press. I think she's beautiful, and I have never claimed to be celibate. Go ahead." That ended the threat. He's getting into subjectivism now. Almost on the heels of this encounter, one of the corporation's minor executives came to see me. It turned out that he was a secret sympathizer with our side. Pointing to his briefcase, he said, "In there is plenty of proof that so and so, a leader of the opposition, prefers boys to girls." I said, "Thanks, but forget it. Lindsey Graham is taken." "I don't fight that way. I don't want to see it. Goodbye." He protested, "But they just tried to hang you on that girl." I replied, "The fact that they fight that way doesn't mean I have to do it. To me, dragging a person's private life into this muck is loathsome and nauseous. He left. So far, so noble. But if I had been convinced that the only way we could win was to use it, then without any reservations, I would have used it. What was my alternative? To draw myself up into righteous moral indignation, saying, I would rather lose than corrupt my principles, and then go home with my ethical hymen intact? The fact that 40,000 poor would lose their war against hopelessness and despair was just too tragic. That their condition would even be worsened by the vindictiveness of the corporation was also terrible and unfortunate. But that's life. After all, one has to remember means and ends. It's true that I might have trouble getting to sleep because it takes time to tuck those big angelic moral wings under the covers. To me, that would be utter immorality. What's funny is, did you see the story that came out last week where it was saying like the new Ayatollah is gay?
So I didn't see that story, but one of my friends who was arguing with me brought that up.
Yeah, what I thought was funny was there's there's a right-wing podcast. They're super Republican guys. I can't even remember the name of their podcast now. Ruthless, the Ruthless podcast. They're pretty funny sometimes though. They have good senses of humor. They're fun to listen to. They're silly, but it gives you like a real it gives you real insight into the like mainstream Republican mindset. And, and one of the guys on there, he goes by the name Smug. He's some Indian guy. I guess he goes by the name Smug because nobody can pronounce his real name. But he said, yeah, the new Ayatollah is gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I just thought that was so mainstream Republican. Even though he said it as a joke, it was like even though you're saying it's like sarcastically, it reflects so many people in the Republican Party. Damn cough. I will curse you until you leave me alone. The sixth rule of the ethics of means and ends is that the less important the end to be desired, the more one can afford to engage in ethical evaluations of means. The seventh rule of the ethics of means and ends is that generally success or failure is a mighty determinant of ethics. The judgment of history leans heavily on the outcome of success or failure. It spells the difference between the traitor and the patriotic hero. There can be no such thing as a successful traitor, for if one succeeds, he becomes a founding father. The eighth rule of the ethics of means and ends is that the morality of a means depends upon whether the means is being employed at a time of imminent defeat or imminent victory. The same means employed with victory seemingly assured may be defined as immoral, whereas if it had been used in desperate circumstances to avert defeat, the question of morality would never arise. In short, ethics are determined by whether one is losing or winning. From the beginning of time, killing has always been regarded as justifiable if committed in self defense. Oh gosh, from the beginning of time.
Since time immemorial. What's funny
He
is
should have said since Cain and Abel.
that was self defense. That was
It was
preemptive.
self-defense.
Preemptive
I
strike.
had to preemptively strike him so that I could build cities and create war propaganda and weapons.
What's funny is he kind of sounds like in parts of this, he kind of sounds like utilitarian, where he's like, well, I think the moral thing to do is whatever's best for the most people.
Yeah.
But then he's also like, well, like victory is what's moral and defeat is immoral.
Hmm.
It's like,
Sounds like Trump.
well, what if like the victory that I win is bad for the most people? He's
Yeah.
not interacting with that contradiction.
Well, but one of the shows I listen to regularly is Two Way with Mark Halperin, and he's kind of like libertarian-ish, I guess. He's kind of a straightforward journalist type. He's been a journalist for like 30 some odd years or something like that. And he's like kind of a straightforward journalist type. Doesn't really have a team, doesn't really pick a side. You can tell he likes Trump because he knows Trump, but he does air grievances whenever there's something Trump does that he disagrees with. But he loves this fucking war. Like he loves this war. And one of the things he keeps saying is the midterms depend on whether or not Trump wins this war. So it's basically like he's saying the same thing. Like if we accomplish victory in this war in Iran and we do it in a timely manner, then it's moral. It's okay. We should have done it. But if we're defeated or we don't do it in a proper time frame, then yeah, we probably shouldn't have gone, and it's going to reflect in the polls. And so it's kind of like the wisdom of the crowds kind of idea that the crowds will tell you if your line of reasoning is or if your action is moral or immoral based upon whether you win or lose. Let
And
us confront. Oh, sorry. Did you have something?
well, just that it seems to me paradoxically like if you want to win in like in the next few months so that you do well in an election, like you're already setting yourself up for a defeat.
Hmm.
Like the Iranians aren't, that's not their perspective. Their perspective is like, whoa, they're trying to like kill all of us or like just turn us into Libya.
Yeah.
Like for them, their lies that they tell their people are going to have so much more weight because there's actual like bombs hitting all around them than than the lies that they tell us, where they're like they're not even really Trump isn't even really committed to the war the way you would think a guy would be who's really trying to win it. He wants to win it, but quickly, or at least look like I want it quickly so that I don't lose like seats in the Congress. Like that's hilarious.
Well, and you also got to think like Persia is an ancient empire. They've been around for like what thousands of years, right? And you know, yes, they're called Iran now, but we all know that's the Persian Empire. That's who they were. And they're ancient and their history goes on forever. The existence of the United States for 250 years is like a blink of an eye to them. So they're looking at it as like the cocky new kid at school. And it's like, I'm established. Who are you? You know, like leave us alone. Like you can't get rid of us that easily, right? It's kind of like Afghan being the empire killer, you know, Afghanistan being the empire killer. It's like that's where empires go to die. Empires don't go there to succeed. They don't go there to conquer. They go there to die. And like you're doing the same thing with Persia. This society has been around for longer than you even imagine history existing. And so it's just it's so interesting. I can't imagine how the average Persian in Iran thinks about the United States and Israel, a nation that was born in 1948 and another nation that was born in the 1780s. You know, it's like how they even view us. They're like, who are these pesky little fucking rodents? You know, leave us alone. And so it's just it's kind of one of those things you gotta like, all right, man, whatever. It's just I don't know. I it's just so mind blowing to me. This whole thing, I'm still kind of like dumbfounded by the whole situation every time I look at it.
You know, one thing that Alinsky said earlier in the book was that like some revolutionary minded people are just, as he put it, aiming at revelation, aiming at the big fiery battle.
Mm,
And he compared it to a film where he's like, they don't want to do the first act and the second act. They want to go right to that third act, like the part in The
right.
Departed where they're all shooting each other,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And when you were talking about just not wanting to listen to leftists spread Iranian propaganda, like I'm with you 100%. And I think that part of that, what's going on with them psychologically, is that they are used to that like narrative framework of a film where there's the good guy and there's the bad guy. And yeah, we were all raised in the propaganda that our government's the good guy and this other government's the bad guy.
Hmm.
And then you start to find out, like, oh, wait a minute, but my government did this, this, and this. I thought those were bad guy things. And then you're given the talking points to explain that. You start asking more questions, you're given more talking points. And at some point, it collapses. And at that moment when your government doesn't look like the good guy anymore, some people, particularly leftists, start thinking, oh my God, it must be the other government was the good guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The communists were the good guys. And there's
Yep.
people on the right who are like, oh, the Nazis were the good guys. Or, yes, these Muslims, they're the good guys. These Persians are the good guys. And then I see like leftists like that I'm friends with, friends with on Facebook, who I basically disagree with them on everything. I disagree with them on like every single thing, except they think we shouldn't have done this war. But then I disagree with them pretty much on like every reason they would give for why we shouldn't have done this war. They'll be like, this war is just like the last gasp of like the white supremacist capitalist order. And it's like, oh, I fucking hate you. But but like, and also like, these are the kind of people who would just like bring infinity Muslims to America and it's going to be all good.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, man, I don't think it's going to be all good. I don't think you have the interests of uh, like me or our nation in mind. I do agree with you that we shouldn't have done this war, but I don't want to listen to you talk about, how like the now the I'm sure they're going to be like, oh my God, is like Trump knew that after they killed a bunch of guys, there'd be this gay Ayatollah, and this would be the chance to like reestablish the authority of the heteropatriarchy. That's why he's doing it.
It's globo homo, man.
We'll send
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham to have a
To
tete-a-tete.
negotiate. Yeah.
Yeah, to
Yeah. Yeah.
negotiate a great peace.
Yeah. No shit. Yeah. And then you find out they're both bad guys.
People don't like that though. People don't. They really don't like
They
that.
got it. No, they have to have that that bifurcation where something's good, something's bad. And it's like, yeah, that's not reality. Sometimes everybody involved is a bad guy.
I saw some movie when I was a kid. I forget what it was called. I would love to watch it again. Um, but there's a great line that the protagonist says throughout the movie. He's like, "The bad guys are always bad. The good guys, who knows?" And it was about like cops and criminals and like intrigue and stuff. But I always remember
Yeah.
that line, and I'll think about it when I consider geopolitics.
Right. Yeah. 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 And when you mentioned The Departed a while ago, when everybody shooting at each other at the end of Departed, my mind went straight to Reservoir Dogs and not to Departed because the end scene when everybody's shooting at each other in Reservoir Dogs is the best end scene ever in any movie. Yes, I was a Quentin Tarantino dork when I was a kid. Yes,
That is
yes,
a great
I
scene.
watched all his movies, and anytime Stuck in the Middle of You comes on, I get a pain in my ear. All right. Let us confront this principle with the most awful ethical question of modern times. Did the United States have the right to use the atomic bomb at Hiroshima? When we dropped the atomic bomb, the United States was assured of victory. In the Pacific, Japan had suffered an unbroken succession of defeats. Now we were in Okinawa with an air base from which we could bomb the enemy around the clock. The Japanese Air Force was decimated, as was their Navy. Victory had come in Europe, and the entire European Air Force, Navy, and Army were released for use in the Pacific. Russia was moving in for a cut of the spoils. Defeat for Japan was an absolute certainty, and the only question was how and when the coup de grace would be administered. For familiar reasons, we dropped the bomb and triggered off as well a universal debate on the morality of the use of this means for the end of finishing the war. I submit that if the atomic bomb had been developed shortly after Pearl Harbor, when we stood defenseless, when most of our Pacific fleet was at the bottom of the sea, when the nation was fearful of invasion on the Pacific coast, when we were committed as well to the war in Europe, that then the use of the bomb at that time on Japan would have been universally heralded as a just retribution of hell, fire, and brimstone. Then the use of the bomb would have been hailed as proof that good inevitably triumphs over evil. The question of the ethics of the use of the bomb would never have arisen at that time, and the character of the present debate would have been very different. Those who would disagree with this assertion have no memory of the state of the world at that time. They are neither fools or liars or both. The ninth rule of the ethics of means and ends is that any effective means is automatically judged by the opposition as being unethical. One of our greatest revolutionary heroes was Francis Marion of South Carolina, who became immortalized in American history as the Swamp Fox. Marion was an outright revolutionary guerrilla. He and his men operated according to the traditions and with all of the tactics commonly associated with the present day guerrillas. Cornwallis and the regular British army found their plans and operations harried and or disorganized by Marion's guerrilla tactics. Infuriated by the effectiveness of his operations and incapable of coping with them, the British denounced him as a criminal and charged that he did not engage in warfare like a gentleman or a Christian. He was subjected to an unremitting denunciation about his lack of ethics and morality for his use of guerrilla means to the end of winning the revolution. The 10th rule of the ethics of means and ends is that you do what you can with what you have and clothe it with moral garments. In the field of action, the first question that arises in the determination of means to be employed for particular ends is what means are available. This requires an assessment of whatever strengths or resources are present and can be used. It involves sifting the multiple factors which combine in creating the circumstances at any given time and an adjustment to the popular views and the popular climate. Questions such as how much time is necessary or available must be considered. Who and how many will support the action? Does the opposition possess the power to the degree that it can suspend or change the laws? Does its control of police power extend to the point where legal and orderly change is impossible? If weapons are needed, then are appropriate weapons available? Availability of means determines whether you will be underground or above ground, whether you will move quickly or slowly, whether you will move for extensive changes or limited adjustments, whether you will move by passive resistance or active resistance, or whether you will move at all. The absence of any means might drive one to martyrdom in the hope that this would be a catalyst, starting a chain reaction that would culminate in a mass movement. Here, a simple ethical statement is used as a means to power. A naked illustration of this point is to be found in Trotsky's summary of Lenin's famous April thesis, issued shortly after Lenin's return from exile. Lenin pointed out the task of the Bolsheviks is to overthrow the imperialist government, but this government rests upon the support of the social revolutionaries and Mensheviks, who in turn are supported by the trustfulness of the masses of people. We are in the minority. In these circumstances, there can be no talk of violence on our side. Excuse me. The essence of Lenin's speeches during this period was they have the guns and therefore we are for peace and for reformation through the ballot. When we have the guns, then it will be through the bullet, and it was. Mahatma Gandhi and his use of passive resistance in India presents a striking example of the selection of means. Here, too, we see the inevitable alchemy of time working upon moral equivalence as a consequence of the changing circumstances and positions of the have-nots to the haves, with the natural shift of goals from getting to keeping. Yeah, I think that isn't that going to be Rule 11 is a revolutionary once in power becomes a conservative. Gandhi is viewed by the world as the epitome of the highest moral behavior with respect to means and ends. We can assume that there are those who would believe that if Gandhi had lived, there would never have been an invasion of Goa or any other armed invasion. Similarly, the politically naive would have regarded it as unbelievable that great apostle of nonviolence, Nehru, would ever have countenanced the invasion of Goa. For it was Nehru who stated in 1955, "What are the basic elements of our policy in regard to Goa? First, there must be peaceful methods. This is essential unless we give up the roots of all our policies and all our behavior. We rule out non peaceful methods entirely. He was a man committed to nonviolence and ostensibly to the love of mankind, including his enemies. His end was the independence of India from foreign domination, and his means was that of passive resistance. History and religious and moral opinion have so enshrined Gandhi in this sacred matrix that in many quarters it is blasphemous to question whether this entire procedure of passive resistance was not simply the only intelligent, realistic, expedient program which Gandhi had at his disposal, and that the morality which surrounded this policy of passive resistance was to a large degree a rationale to cloak a pragmatic program with a desired and essential moral cover. Excuse me. Let us examine this case. First, Gandhi, like any other leader in the field of social action, was compelled to examine the means at hand. If he had had guns, he might well have used them in an armed revolution against the British, which would have been in keeping with the traditions of revolutions for freedom through force. Gandhi did not have the guns, and if he had the guns, he would not have had the people to use the guns. Gandhi records in his autobiography his astonishment at the passivity and submissiveness of his people in not retaliating or even wanting revenge against the British. As I proceeded further and further with my inquiry into the atrocities that had been committed on the people, I came across tales of government's tyranny and the arbitrary despotism of its officers, such as I was hardly prepared for, and they filled me with deep pain. What surprised me then, and what still continues to fill me with surprise, was the fact that a province that had furnished the largest number of soldiers to the British government during the war should have taken all these brutal excesses lying down. Gandhi and
Sometimes,
oh, go ahead.
sometimes I feel that way about white people.
I don't identify as white. I like being interesting.
I don't identify as white either, but I know that there are people out there who would classify me as white with malevolent intentions. So I
I,
watch my six.
I remember one time it was one of the an early episode I was recording and I had Quincy on. I don't know if you know who Quincy is, but he's another truck driver and he is a funny son of a bitch. And I would have him on just to come in and give comic relief, and him and I would just bullshit for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I made some joke sometime, and he goes, "Dude, you are the blackest motherfucker I have ever met in my life." It was one of the funniest things I'd ever heard. He'd come over to the house when he'd be driving through town. He'd come over to the house, and my dogs love him. I mean, these big old monsters, they just can't get enough Quincy when he's here. And he came over, and we're drinking beer. And I think he had to get up at like 5 o'clock the next morning and go back over the road. And so I I was like, "Hey, dude, it's getting late." And he's like, "Man, I'd move, man, but these dogs won't stop licking my legs, man. I think they're gonna lick the black right off of me." And they will. If he would sit there and he would let the dogs lick him for like hours, and they would just lick and lick and lick. He's like, eventually they're gonna get tired. I'm like, "No, Quincy, if you sit there and let them lick you, they are going to lick you."
Tasty Quincy.
Yeah, tasty Quincy. I need to get him back on. We texted around Christmas. He texted me, but yeah, he's he's hilarious, dude. I'm gonna have to get him back on just for a goof off interview and just to have some fun. So Gandhi and his associates repeatedly deplored the inability of their people to give organized, effective, violent resistance against injustice and tyranny. His own experience was corroborated by an unbroken series of reiterations from all the leaders of India that India could not practice physical warfare against her enemies. Many reasons were given, including weakness, lack of arms, having been beaten into submission, and other arguments of a similar nature. Interviewed by Norman Cousins in 1961, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru described the Hindus of those days as a demoralized, timid, and hopeless mass bullied and crushed by every dominant interest and incapable of resistance. Faced with this situation, we revert from the moment to Gandhi's assessment and review of the means available to him. It has been stated that if he had had the guns, he might have used them. This statement is based on the Declaration of Independence of Mahatma Gandhi issued on January 26, 1930, where he discussed the fourfold disaster to our country. His fourth indictment against the British reads: spiritually compulsory disarmament has made us unmanly, and the presence of an alien army of occupation employed with deadly effect to crush in us the spirit of resistance has made us think we cannot look after ourselves or put up a defense against foreign aggression or even defend our homes and families. These words more than suggest that if Gandhi had had the weapons for violent resistance and the people to use them, this means would not have been so unreservedly rejected as the world would like to think. On the same point, we might note that once India had secured independence, when Nehru was faced with a dispute with Pakistan over Kashmir, he did not hesitate to use armed force. Now the power arrangements had changed. India had the guns and the trained army to use them, or to use the weapons, sorry. Any suggestion that Gandhi would not have approved the use of violence is negated by Nehru's own statement in that 1961 interview. It was a terrible time. When the news reached me about Kashmir, I knew I would have to act at once with force. Yet I was greatly troubled in mind and spirit because I knew we might have to face a war so soon after having achieved our independence through a philosophy of nonviolence. It was horrible to think of, yet I acted. Gandhi said nothing to indicate his disapproval. It was a great relief, I must say. If Gandhi, the vigorous nonviolent, didn't demur, it made my job a lot easier. This strengthened my view that Gandhi could be adaptable. Confronted with the issue of what means he could employ against the British, we come to the other criteria previously mentioned that the kind of means selected and how they can be used is significantly dependent upon the face of the enemy or the character of his opposition. Gandhi's opposition not only made the effective use of passive resistance possible, but practically invited it. His enemy was a British administration characterized by an old aristocratic liberal tradition, one which granted a good deal of freedom to its colonials and which always had operated on a pattern of using, absorbing, seducing, or destroying through flattery or corruption the revolutionary leaders who arose from the colonial ranks. This was the kind of opposition that would have tolerated and ultimately capitulated before the tactic of passive resistance.
You know,
Gandhi. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I grew up in Massachusetts, and at the time, this might still be the case. I don't know, but at the time, if you were to go pretty much any elementary school in Massachusetts and go to the cafe auditorium area, the cafetorium as we called it, on the wall there would be paintings of four individuals: uh, JFK, MLK, Mother Teresa, and Abraham Lincoln. Gandhi did not make it onto the wall, but he was definitely talked about a lot in the classroom. Um, but going through this idea that, well, Gandhi chose nonviolence because he didn't have guns. It's no excuse, Gandhi. Hijack some motherfucking airliners, bitch.
Quit being a pussy.
Terrible.
Stop wheezing the juice. Gandhi's passive resistance would never have had a chance against a totalitarian state such as that of the Nazis. It is dubious whether, under those circumstances, the idea of passive resistance would even have occurred to Gandhi. It has been pointed out that Gandhi, who was born in 1869, never saw or understood totalitarianism and defined his opposition completely in terms of the character of the British government and what it represented. I thought maybe I'm wrong about this, but I thought his entire argument was that he didn't like British rule because because the British weren't Indian, and that it didn't matter how totalitarian the government was, that it should be Indians in charge and not the British. And if they were going to have to be oppressed by somebody, it should be by their own people. I thought that was what the argument was. Maybe I have that wrong.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Okay. It's not just me. Okay. George Orwell, in his essay Reflection on Gandhi, made some pertinent observations on this point. He believed in arousing the world, which is only possible if the world gets a chance to hear what you are doing. It is difficult to see how Gandhi's methods could be applied in a country where opponents of the regime disappear in the middle of the night and are never heard of again. Without a free press and the right of assembly, it is impossible not merely to appeal to outside opinion, but to bring a mass movement into being, or even to make your intentions known to your adversary. From a pragmatic point of view, passive resistance was not only possible, but was the most effective means that could have been selected for the end of ridding India of British control. In organizing, the major negative in the situation has to be converted into the leading positive. In short, knowing that one could not expect violent action from this large and torpid mass, Gandhi organized the inertia. He gave it a goal so that it became purposeful. Their wide familiarity with Dharma made passive resistance no stranger to the Hindustani. To oversimplify, what Gandhi did was to say, look, you are all sitting there anyway. So instead of sitting there, why don't you sit over here? And while you're sitting, say independence now. Yeah, glue your hands to the floor. This raises another question about the morality of means and ends. We have already noted that, in essence, mankind divides itself into three groups: the have nots, the have a littles, want mores, and the haves. The purpose of the haves is to keep what they have. Therefore, the haves want to maintain the status quo and the have nots to change it. I hate all the repetition. That is driving me crazy. Like, this is like the sixth time he said this just in two chapters. And in this chapter alone, he continues to repeat himself over and over and over. It's like, dude, I get it. And then he comes in this paragraph before. He's like, long story short, too late, buddy. You just keep saying the same shit over and over again.
He's
Sorry.
got to catapult the propaganda.
I guess, man, I just had to get that off my chest because damn, just get to the point, dude. The haves develop their own morality to justify their means of repression and all other means employed to maintain the status quo. The haves usually establish laws and judges devoted to maintaining the status quo, since any effective means of changing the status quo are usually illegal and or unethical in the eyes of the establishment. Have-nots from the beginning of time have been compelled to appeal to a law higher than man-made law. Then, when the have nots achieve success and become the haves, they are in the position of trying to keep what they have, and their morality shifts with their change of location in the power pattern. They become the conservatives. 8 months after securing independence, the Indian National Congress outlawed passive resistance and made it a crime. It was one thing for them to use the means of passive resistance against the previous haves, but now in power, they were going to ensure that this means would not be used against them. No longer as have-nots were they appealing to laws higher than man-made law. Now that they were making the laws, they were on the side of man-made laws. Hunger strikes, used so effectively in the revolution, were viewed differently now too. Nehru, in the interview mentioned above, said, "The government will not be influenced by hunger strikes. To tell the truth, I didn't approve of fasting as a political weapon even when Gandhi practiced it." Again, Sam Adams, the firebrand radical of the American Revolution, provides a clear example. Adams was foremost in proclaiming the right of revolution. However, following the success of the American Revolution, it was the same Sam Adams who was foremost in demanding the execution of those Americans who participated in Shays' Rebellion, charging that no one had a right to engage in revolution against us.
This is, I always find satanic communism, I know, redundant, but I always find satanic communism to be so reductionist, like aggravatingly reductionist in its social and class analysis. And even here, where he's like, oh, there's the haves and the have nots, and the have a little want more. But once a have a little want more or have not becomes a have, then they're just like the haves. But like the examples he's giving are showing that no, that's actually not true. There's something like deeper going on
Mm,
because the British didn't crack down on the passive resistance the way he's saying that the new Indian government did. And like the the Leninists are a really great example. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's something like between 1850 and 1917, the Tsarist regime executed like 6,000 people. And the Bolsheviks would execute 6,000 people on a Tuesday.
yeah.
And because and this is just my like psychologizing interpretation, but like the Tsar was born into great wealth and privilege and tradition, whereas so he's a have.
Hmm.
Lenin is is like textbook have a little want more. And when he wants more of his power. So he has a different experience with power throughout his life. And he comes up with different models for it. So he convinced himself that, you know, you need to rule with terror. You need to kill 10% of the population to show the people that you're serious. And then
Hmm.
also he can empathize with the revolutionary in a way that the Tsar can't. And he can hate that because he knew what he was thinking when he was trying to overthrow the government. Oh hell no, I'm not letting somebody else think like that. I'm going to crush it before they can even get to the point of thinking about it. So
Hmm.
there's definitely something deeper going on that Olinsky is not aware of, or just not doesn't find it to be helpful to his cause. It's like when he's talking about um the founding fathers and their rhetoric, how they're gonna make it like we're 100% good and the British are 100% bad. He's like intentionally leaving it out, but it's there. He's mentioning it. I find that
Right.
really annoying.
Well, one of the interesting things I find that most people leave out of conversations like this is the fact of, okay, if you're the head of a household, right? And let's say you're a head of the household in like 17th century America, where it's all agriculture. And so you're building a farm and you're getting cattle, so you're ranching, you may have pigs, sheep, and you're growing corn and wheat, let's just say, for instance. You build that farm up and not to control the town around you, whereas you might get a lot of political influence in that town around you, but you build that farm up for the security of your family in the future so that you leave them a legacy, so that you leave them something, right? So when you look at the czarist or you look at any monarchist coming up in a system, their entire plan is to pass down into their lineage to their firstborn child, their firstborn son is going to take over this structure, this empire. that I'm building is going to my firstborn son. So I want it to be in pristine shape. I want to take care of it. I want it to last. I want it to be valuable for my child. So the way that you treat the servant class, your workers in your fields, is going to be with some due respect. But when you take over a government as Lenin did through the Bolshevik Revolution, you don't care about those people. You don't care about the next generation taking power. All you're thinking is, I got to get mine today. I got to get as much as I can right now because eventually I'm not going to be in charge anymore. Somebody else is coming up through the system. So when we look at the monarchist system, I'm sure there were plenty of wrongs that were done and there were plenty of grievances, but there was some sort of care that the monarch would take of his own property in order to hand it down to his children to ensure his children's well-being moving forward into the future. And so the mentality of ruling over a kingdom as a monarch is completely different than ruling over a nation as a president or as a prime minister or something like that. You have a completely different mentality because in 8 years I'm gone. That's it. That's all you get of me. So I got to get what I can while I can.
That makes me think of something earlier in this book that I've been thinking about the past couple of weeks. Um, and specifically in relation to like the um satanic aspect of the book. And I've been thinking about how in Europe there's all these churches and cathedrals that took hundreds of years to build. So there were people who worked maybe their entire working life as a laborer or a craftsman on that project, and they never got to see it completed.
Hmm.
They maybe never really got to see it like halfway done or like really starting to come together. And I thought, Alinsky kind of talks like that, like he's giving his life to some project that he's never going to see
Yeah.
the completion of. But it's not, but what it is really is just chaos.
Hmm.
So it's not like some uh beautiful ordered structures being created that he's never going to see it created. No, he's just aiming at destruction. And, or as you pointed out, like the total state as the Tower of Babel. And it's kind of funny that, yeah, that's not something, it's almost like he's trying to like institutionalize the chaos.
Hmm.
He's trying to give this order to this thing that cannot be ordered because it, by definition, is chaos.
Yeah. The United States, like in we. So yeah. It makes me think there was a short story I wrote years ago. I must have been in my 30s, early 30s, probably 30, 31. I wrote, and what I think it was like the opening line to the story. It was like somebody was talking to the devil and the devil's responding to them. And he says, God is the builder. He's the creator. He is not my priority and not my business. I'm but an architect of chaos.
That's awesome. I want to read that story.
I'm gonna have to find it.
Find that story.
Yeah. I'll probably have to do some editing to it, but yeah, I'd have to find it. I
It's
have it
great. The
somewhere.
architect of chaos.
Yeah.
What else is funny when you say that is that in the past few pages, Alinsky sounds like an engineer.
Hmm. Yeah,
Where
he's
like,
drawing this is a blueprint.
yeah, because engineers will be like, you know, it's wrong to ask what's the best way to do something. What you ask is what are all the possible ways to do it? And then and then you pick which one based on factors like cost and time and other issues like that. He's he's an engineer of chaos.
Mm. All right. Moral rationalization is indispensable at all times of action, whether to justify the selection or the use of ends or means. Machiavelli's blindness to the necessity for moral clothing to all acts and motives, he said politics has no relation to morals, was his major weakness. All great leaders, including Churchill, Gandhi, Lincoln, and Jefferson, always invoked moral principles to cover naked self interest in the clothing of freedom, equality of mankind, a law higher than man made law, and so on. This even held under circumstances of national crisis when it was universally assumed that the end justified any means. All effective actions required the passport of morality. The examples are everywhere in the United States. The rise of the civil rights movement in the late 1950s was marked by the use of passive resistance in the South against segregation. Violence in the South would have been suicidal. Political pressure was then impossible. The only recourse was economic pressure with a few fringe activities. Legally blocked by state laws, hostile police and courts, they were compelled, like all have nots from time immemorial, to appeal to a law higher than man made law. In his social contract, oh God, Rousseau noted the obvious that law is a very good thing for men with property and a very bad thing for men without property. Passive resistance remained one of the few means available to anti segregationist forces until they had secured the voting franchise, in fact. Furthermore, passive resistance was also a good defensive tactic since it curtailed the opportunities for use of the power resources of the status quo for forcible repression. Passive resistance was chosen for the same pragmatic reason that all tactics are selected, but it assumes the necessary moral and religious adornments. However, when passive resistance becomes massive and threatening, it gives birth to violence. Southern Negroes have no tradition of Dharma and are close enough to their northern compatriots so that contrasting conditions between the North and the South are a visible as well as a constant spur. Add to this the fact that the Southern poor whites do not operate by British tradition, but reflect generations of violence. The future does not argue for making a special religion of nonviolence. It will be remembered for what it was, the best tactic for its time and place. As more effective means become available, the Negro civil rights movement will divest itself of these decorations and substitute a new moral philosophy in keeping with its new means and opportunities. The explanation will be as it always has been: times have changed. This is happening today. The 11th rule of the ethics of means and ends is that goals must be phrased in general terms like liberty, equality, fraternity, of the common welfare, pursuit of happiness, or bread and peace. Whitman put it, the goal once named cannot be countermanded. It has been previously noted that the wise man of action knows that frequently in the stream of action of means towards ends, whole new and unexpected ends are among the major results of the action. From a civil war fought as a means to preserve the Union came the end of slavery. I just keep waiting on him to quote what's his name, Kendi, Ibram X Kendi, when he says past discrimination can only be cured by present discrimination, and present discrimination can only be cured by future discrimination. And it's like, okay, so you're talking about a never-ending cycle of just everybody discriminating against everybody, just taking our turns. It's like, okay, you beat me, and then I get up and I get to beat you so that you get to get up and you get to beat me. It's like, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but when does somebody just say, fuck this, I'm going to kill you? Like it's like you have, yeah, it's just, it takes no consideration into the concept of human nature and what humanity is willing to do to preserve itself. And if they feel like you're turning on them to make them the scapegoat for crimes they never were involved in and never committed, then they might do some really nasty stuff.
Yeah, I think about this when I talk to friends or I see it online where people are like, "Oh, what's the matter, white people? You're afraid of being a minority?" And I always think that's interesting because there's an assumption when they say that like when the white people are the minority, say 20% of the population, that they're going to be dominated by the BIPOC and they're going to get their vengeance for shit that these people never did. But oh, it's past discrimination and this mythology with the slavery and the Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm like, well, maybe that's what'll happen. But have you ever heard of Iraq under Saddam Hussein? 20% of the population was Sunni, um, and they dominated the government.
Hmm.
60% of the population was Shia. 20% was Kurds and whatnot. And one of the ways they dominated the majority population is they would rape their children in front of them. Like that kind of thing happens. People are capable of that. So you're over here with your fantasy of like revenge against these past crimes that you didn't even personally experience.
Mm.
And you're like telling people, you're telling the whites this. And it's like you're just contributing to the potential creation of a very malevolent white consciousness that doesn't really exist in this nation right now.
Yeah.
But it's like you're trying to create it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, okay, so what happens when white people become the minority? Okay. White people are called what? Caucasians. So what are we going we're going to start importing people from like barbarians and Neanderthal people from like the Caucasus area, Dagestan and Uzbekistan and all these stands where these people still live in caves and wrestle bears. Like, all right, dude, yeah. Now we got our fighting force. It's like, come on, man. Like, this is stupid. Like, what are
We're gonna
we
bring
doing?
we're gonna bring the Azov battalion to defend us.
Yeah, right. I bet they'll call them Nazis real quick. In this connection, it must be remembered that history is made up of actions in which one end results in other ends. Repeatedly, scientific discoveries have resulted from experimental research committed to ends or objectives that have little relationship with the discoveries. Work on a seemingly minor practical program has resulted in feedbacks of major creative basic ideas. That N where it says has resulted in feedbacks, doesn't that look like the letter M and not the word in? Ugh, some of this old writing like all rubbed off. All right. Work on a seemingly minor practical program has resulted in feedbacks of major creative basic ideas. J.C. Flugel notes in Man, Morals, and Society that in psychology, too, we have no right to be astonished if, while dealing with a means, e.g., the cure of a neurotic symptom, the discovery of more efficient ways of learning, or the relief of industrial fatigue, we find that we have modified our attitude toward the end, acquired some new insight into the nature of mental health, the role of education, or the place of work in human life. If you want to know more about this, go watch Buck Johnson's last show, the Counterflow podcast on neurodivergence. The mental shadow boxing on the subject of means and ends is typical of those who are the observers and not the actors in the battlefields of life. In The Yogi and the Commissar, Kostler begins with the basic fallacy of an arbitrary demarcation between expediency and morality. Between the yogi, for whom the end never justifies the means, and the commissar for whom the ends always justifies the means. Koestler attempts to extricate himself from this self constructed straitjacket by proposing that the end justifies the means only within narrow limits. Here, Koestler, even in an academic confrontation with action, was compelled to take the first step in the course of compromise on the road to action and power. How narrow the limits and who defines the narrow limits opens the door to the premises discussed here. The kind of personal safety and security sought by the advocates of the sanctity of means and ends lies only in the womb of yogism or the monastery, and even there it is darkened by the repudiation of that moral principle that they are their brother's keepers. Bertrand Russell, in his Human Society and Ethics and Politics, observed that morality is so much concerned with means that it seems almost immoral to consider anything solely in relation to its intrinsic worth. But obviously, nothing has any value as a means unless that to which it is a means has value on its own account. It follows that intrinsic value is logically prior to value as means. The organizer, the revolutionist, the activist, or call him what you will, who is committed to a free and open society, is in that commitment anchored to a complex of high values. These values include the basic morals of all organized religions. Their base is the preciousness of human life. These values include freedom, equality, justice, peace, the right to dissent, the values that were the banners of hope and yearning of all revolutions of men. Whether the French revolutions, liberty, fraternity, equality, the Russians, bread and peace, the brave Spanish people's better to die on your feet than to live on your knees, or our revolutions, no taxation without representation. They include the values in our own Bill of Rights. If a state voted for school segregation or a community organization voted to keep blacks out and claim justification by virtue of the democratic process, then this violation of the value of equality would have converted democracy into a prostitute. Democracy is not an end. It is the best political means available toward the achievement of these values. I wonder if Iran's new slogan is better to live on your knees than die on your feet. Means and ends are so qualitatively interrelated that the true question has never been the proverbial one. Does the end justify the means? But always has been, does this particular end justify this particular means? Now, a word from our sponsor. All right. Final comments on that particular chapter?
Well, it's really fascinating. I always think talking about ethics and morality, and something I've been thinking about recently is um, axioms and values. And there's this idea that I got from um, the biologist E.O. Wilson, and then also this mathematician who was recently on the Lex Friedman show, and I forget his name, but like putting their different works together, I got this idea that biology is underpinned by chemistry, and chemistry is underpinned by physics, and physics is underpinned by math, and math is underpinned by axioms. But what are axioms? Those are just assumptions. So all of our knowledge is built on these assumptions. But I was thinking, well, but they're not just assumptions. I mean, they give them that fancy name axiom, maybe to obscure the fact that they're assumptions, but they're like assumptions that really smart people, or people that I think are smart, or people who think that they're smart and everyone else is also smart in their group, sort of buy into.
Mm.
So I had the idea, well, it's like you stop at, I was just in my mind, in my model, stopping at the assumptions, but then well, like the assumptions are being underpinned by us. And so he's kind of, you know, in that position. He doesn't really say that, but since he rejects God and he embraces Satan, he's basically, and he's, as you pointed out, he's basically saying, embrace your corruption. And that's his foundation, is the corruptness of human nature. That's what's going to underpin the values and then the means and the ends and everything else. And then I would also say it's really cool reading this book with you because I'm not saying I wouldn't have understand it, but my understanding of it would have been much poorer. I wouldn't have really zeroed in on this like antichrist satanic commitments that is running throughout it. So that's really beautiful to be able to see. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things whenever you're going through and reading a work like this with another person, you're getting a secondary perspective, from it. We share, you and I share a lot of commonalities in the way we think about things and the way that we view the world. But I have distinct interests that I am engulfed in, just like you have distinct interests that you are engulfed in. So we're both bound to see certain things that the other person kind of misses, or it doesn't speak as strongly to me, to the other person. So it's always fun, to go through a work like this, like with a book club or something like that. And I would always encourage people to do something like that because you're going to get different things out of it. There are a lot of things that people are going to see that you necessarily won't see. And, I mean, like when I was reading the second to last paragraph, I'm reading it and thinking, well, this guy just does not understand Christianity at all. Like he's he's making the assumption that the values of religion, of all religions, of all organized religions, is based on the preciousness of human life. Well, that's not what Christianity's about. And so there is a preciousness through the creation of humanity in the image of God. Yes, there is some sort of preciousness, but there's also an acceptance that humanity is corrupt, and its entire goal is to overcome that corruption, to walk a life with Christ, or walk the royal path, as some of the church fathers have said. And so when I read that, I might see that completely different than you would see it, because I immediately think to, well, these are the readings and teachings that I am completely entrenched in, and this is a 180-degree turn away from everything that I have dedicated my life to discovering and to learning, you know. And so that's why I knew that chapter was going to just be, for me, is going to be probably the most cringe of all the chapters of this book. Having listened to this
Fringe
book is,
AF.
yes, yes, it definitely triggers me.
I
So,
myself am also triggered from that chapter.
so I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go bathe. I feel like I've been raped. So I'm gonna have to scrub myself thoroughly. So do like a Bugs Bunny with the rag in my ear and just clean all that nonsense out of there. Because not only did I have to read it, I had to hear it too. All right, man. Well, I need to go spend some time with my puppies and see what my wife is doing. I'm sure she is about ready to crash out for the night. Um, it looked like I got home and she was in bed, and I was like, "Oh, she's been in bed all day, just chilling. Good for her. She deserves it. She needs a day to relax every once in a while.
No
We all
doubt.
do." So, so yeah, I'm gonna run and do that. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I always appreciate you coming and doing this with me, John, and we will see you
Thanks for
next
having me,
week.
Tommy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna stop this recording.